Welcome to Let's Talk Value. My distinct pleasure to welcome Marieke Jonkman today to the podium.
Thank you for inviting me, Farina. I'm very happy to be here today.
So in this loose series, as you may remember, we talk with various experts and leaders across the healthcare sector, which we refer to the 5 Ps: patient, provider, pharma, payer, and policy. And too often than not, there are particular interests in play and bargaining power, and these interests don't always align. My name is Verena Wolter. I'm the CEO and founder of 5P Healthcare Solutions, a boutique consulting firm that helps actually these experts and leaders work together better. And I'm the author of It Takes 5 to Tango, where I'm describing some of the root causes to why this is actually not working, and offer a couple of solutions around value-based healthcare and collaborative negotiation. But today is really an important day because we talk about the people behind the function and the people behind the silos, and the topic of emotional intelligence. And this is where Marieke really is leading at the forefront here to help us get better in our own awareness, but also acquire a new skill set on how we can become better negotiators at the table and interact with our fellow human beings at the table, be it, in other experts than we are, but we need to get better in really finding a language and how we can better interact. So without further ado, Marieke, please tell us, what is your understanding and what does value mean to you in healthcare?
Yeah, that is such a difficult and great question to answer at the same time. And I have to tell the story. A couple of weeks ago, I was in a conversation with my neighbor, and I live in a community of Mennonites. So it's always, a little different than, I grew up. So my neighbor told me that she thinks that the medical community is way too much focused on prolonging life and too little focused on the quality of life. So I thought about this discussion and conversation that I had with her for a long time, and I think I agree with her to a very large extent. We are all, especially in the pharmaceutical industry, so focused on the science and of the care that sometimes we lose sight of what truly matters, and that's, of course, the patients. And I really do believe that we're doing everything with the right intent, that we're incredibly passionate about the science, and, without, doubt, that is really advancing care, but it's not the only thing that is advancing care. So to me, value in healthcare is in the eye of the beholder or the patients at the time. Are we serving the patient in their particular healthcare goals?
Excellent, and thanks for that reminder, and good comment from your neighbor. But I think this is really putting it on the spot. And so you already mentioned, science and pharmaceutical industry, and to that extent also academic research. So you've spent most of your career, but many years of your career in the pharmaceutical industry, but more precisely in the medical function, which is working very closely with the scientific discovery and clinical development and studies, and working with doctors and patients also to a certain extent. So if you reflect about that part of the ecosystem, what gets in the way of consistently delivering that value that you were just describing?
Yeah. So I think there are many facets to what is prohibiting or, is not advancing the value as fast or as well as we think we should, or how well we can. I really think that's, just as we in the pharmaceutical industry are passionate about the science, others, in the different ecosystem of healthcare are equally passionate about their contributions. But, as everybody knows, in the past couple of decades, we've had a very, substantial social, economic, and political shift. And our focus has become much more narrowed on what we do, particularly in our silo, and we are no longer recognizing or even appreciating the dynamic of basically the village that cares for the patients. So I think what's really preventing us from getting where we are is that we're too focused on ourselves and not, outwardly to advance the patients.
Yeah. So what do you think, or I believe you're convinced that the role of pharma and medical leadership in pharma could be, because this is where you now really commit yourselves and give back a lot of your experience. So what could be the role then of medical leadership, to break it down more concretely to some of the functions in the 5P ecosystem?
That's so I'm really passionate, and maybe I'm a little, have my eye blinkers on as well. But I think medical affairs leaders are uniquely positioned to really advance the entire ecosystem. And it's particularly because of who we are. First of all, most of us, if not all of us, have been clinicians or providers. So, we know how that ecosystem works. So we also know what patients need and what patients want. So we already have those two perspectives. Now, as clinicians, or as we, are going in developing in our roles within the pharmaceutical industry, we also get very, close view of payers, what payers need, what payers want, and how they are perceiving their particular ecosystem. Now, of course, we are restricted with, very regulatory, restrictions, so to speak. But in medical affairs, we still understand that there's a business need for the pharmaceutical company. We have to understand that. Now, I also realize that most of us, or some of us, don't exactly have the regulatory policymaker view. But if you really look at it on the whole, from all angles, I think within medical affairs, our lives intersect on so many different ways with the different P's, as you are describing in your book. So I really think we can make the difference. We can be that tipping point, that can advance, patient care and really, deliver to the patient what we need to deliver to the patient. So that's my—
Thank you. You described it really nicely, like obviously these 5Ps have all these intersections among them, and certain expertise or groups of expertise sit further apart from the intersections, and some are closer to the intersections, and some are maybe at the intersection of all of them. And you really reminded us so nicely that the medical function within pharmaceutical is sitting very close in the really inner circle of all these, where all these intersections converge, and you've described nicely why that is. So now breaking it down one level even further to the individuals and the human beings. And as human beings, we're not machines. We even Eric Topol, who wrote the great book about AI and deep intelligence, he is also saying, well, AI is actually there to help us keep the human touch. So let's talk a little bit about the human touch. And as I said in my introduction, having worked as a negotiation coach for many years, really, I'm coming to think that the number one barrier to collaboration is actually our own emotions, and that are in friction with the emotions of the other person, that is also very passionate of what you said, defending their position and their convictions and their, what they really believe in is important for patients and the healthcare system. So tell us now, what is it actually in your work that you do when you work with medical affairs leaders, and when you work and apply emotional intelligence themes, and what type of skills do you teach?
Yeah. Well, it's hard to really describe, the secret sauce of what I do step by step, but it's very important to realize that emotional awareness of self and others and our emotional regulations are the key to success. Just like you say, sometimes it's our emotions and our perspectives that are inhibiting or preventing us from actually reaching our particular goals. And I have a, funny saying about that emotions are like kids in a car. You do not want them behind the steering wheel and take over the ride, but at the same time, you cannot put them in the trunk either. They need to be buckled up in the back seats and, have their particular place.
I love it. That's great. That's the best description I've ever heard. That's amazing.
Yeah, but because when you are in negotiations and you're letting your emotions take over the wheel, you're not going to get anywhere. At the same point, at the same time, if you put them in the trunk, you are not fully productive in your actions, because what we need to realize is that all our actions are driven by our emotions. In fact, as we study it, we have three things that contribute to our final actions. First, it's the trigger, then it's the situation, and the third is our pre-existing experience. Those three things together become a thought, which then become a physiological response within the body, which becomes your emotion, which then becomes an action. And that's either productive or unproductive. And that, of course, then becomes our pre-existing condition again. And so that's how we have the feedback loop. Now, here is what I specifically teach, and it sounds very complex, but it really isn't. It's really getting from A to B to C to D. But what I teach is really to have your thought process become intentionally and purposefully, so that you engage your prefrontal cortex and in expansive thinking. Because expansive thinking, that's really what emotional intelligence is. That's so by breaking down the thought process in these manageable steps and applying them in different situations over time during, our sessions, this thought process will, you will just master it, and you can apply it to your negotiation skills or, other parts of life as well. And I realize it sounds complex, but really when you get clarity in what that thought process is, things will fall into place, very easily in many aspects.
What have some of your participants or even yourself maybe told you and realized once they worked on their own self-awareness and how to, and some of these concepts are also we take from, meditation and, reframing thoughts and putting that distance between the thought and the emotion and the action. So what are some of the feedback you're hearing that help people? What do they do differently in their day job with a physician? And maybe you've heard somebody recently from your workshops, or maybe even yourself, since you've been applying it for yourself.
Yeah, that's so one example which I really love, and that's how you're done. That's when everything is finished. Is last week, one of my now I would say previous clients had mastered the thought process very well. She had originally a lot of difficulty with executive presence on on the leadership team, and she wasn't particularly heard very well. So we worked for about 12 weeks, and last week in our session I said, "Hello, how are you doing?" She started talking, and the next thing I said after 30 minutes, because she went through the thought process step by step and really resolved her own problem at that time, the next thing I said, "You don't need me any longer," because that's reframing thoughts with meditation. Once you have that step by step down, when you recognize you have the insight, you recognize your ability, and you start putting it in practice, then the accountability will come right around. So really the big difference that I see is a lot of clarity, much more ease in your conversations, in your communications, becoming more assertive in your communications without being aggressive or manipulative or passive aggressive, even in some cases. Receiving that clarity makes it just easier to get to the points that you need to get to.
And I think what you're referring to also from your client, without for her own kind of presence in an example of an executive leadership, reminds me one of the steps of the 7 steps of negotiation is communication, and it's about communicating your own interest as much as to listen to the interests and learn and appreciate. That's how we started our conversation today. That is, we learn these skills to help understand the others in the ecosystem of the 5 Ps better. But part of it is also, do we actually communicate well enough our own interests, and do we stand up? Because sometimes we assume, be it, let's say, medical affairs leader in pharma, we assume the commercial colleague, or we assume the doctor, or we assume the FDA knows what we know, and it's actually not true. How can they know? They have enough to do in their own expertise and their own function. So how do we communicate well enough what we are in for, what are our interests, what is our passion, and then actually seek to understand the other one as well. But I think it goes through that, as you say, thought process and understanding actually yourself better, so that you then can approach your peers and partners better.
Yeah, I 100% agree. When you realize what the story is that you tell yourself, you can dissect the story you are telling yourself about what others are implying, and then you can break down the obstructions of your, but that's your part. That's not what I'm focusing on. I'm focusing on the story you're telling yourself.
Exactly. Perfect. And that's where we started, right? The negotiation with your inner dialogue, with your inner self, with your team of three, me, myself, and I, right? Is your team of three. But I know, I mean, we're getting into the details here, so I can invite everybody really who enjoys this type of topic or who wants to learn more, please reach out to Marieke. She's very available on social media, and I'm sure you can contact her personally. And if you like this series and this conversation, please like and share as always. But before we get to a close, there's always, we know that in healthcare, our big problems, we need to get better with digitalization, which unfortunately medicine and healthcare has been kind of old-fashioned and, catching that bandwagon of the fourth industrial revolution. So I know, Marieke, you're working with your teams, and be it, medical science liaisons, which we call MSLs in the pharmaceutical industry. What are some digital tools you're helping or applying in your skills trainings?
That's yeah, I am totally embracing, the digital revolution, and we are really getting so far. I think, the digital, component of the entire ecosystem is driven by us humans. Like, for instance, I think it's a perfect supplement to, the individual things that you and I do. To master a skill in capabilities, you need repetition in a varied environment. Like my colleague, Dr. Siegel, says, where attention goes, information flows, and neurons grow. That's so, like you said, together with my team, we've developed an app which is currently in beta testing, but it embodies this particular principle. So through daily micro learnings, it will challenge you in the current thought process and to become more emotional intelligence and expand your way of thinking. And by having these little repeated things on a daily basis, you are building a habit within your within your brain. And that applies to how you're thinking. It applies to how you learn some technical skills. It applies to, negotiations, of course. So I really think that, this is the way of the future. That's the digital is really the support of, what the skills and the mastery that we as individuals, as humans, develop in particular areas, whether it is, technical or cognitive. It's a great way of supporting, the roles that we play in our various, parts.
And it really goes with the empowerment as well, right? You don't always, I mean, we still want face-to-face workshops because as we said, the human touch and the interaction is super important. So it's not to replace some more traditional learning environments, but I think the app-based learning, it's because it's at the time that you choose and you decide, and the short period, it doesn't always have to be an hour training, sometimes 10 minutes. And I think like from the cognitive and the neuroscience perspective, the repetition is so important. But I really want to emphasize the empowerment piece, because I think at the end, we don't talk about this today, but also apps for patients, that's a big theme in terms of health literacy, to empower patients because they can do stuff on their own, on their beloved phone. So here you are driving something really cool in terms of, yes, emotional skills as a topic, because that's your theme. But I think I want to encourage everybody out there, work more on apps for MSLs and for others, because, the self-training is great, and do it in a fun way. And I know that's close to your heart.
Right. Because it's, like you said, empowerment, autonomy. It really, gives you the confidence even, whether you're introverted or extroverted, it gives you the confidence, to slowly get where you want. And it's fun. We should all have fun. That's
Before we close today, Marieke, what else would you like to leave the audience with?
That's I would really would like to leave, with curiosity. I really implore everybody to stay curious. That's whenever you feel, kind of blocked or things aren't exactly going, become curious, because I believe that curiosity is the basis of every solution to every single problem. So what I want to leave with is stay curious, my friends.
Thank you very much, Marieke Jonkman.
That's it. Thank you, Verena.